Hey guys, so today I'm going to be going over our very first Mythic Sylvanas skill. What this video is going to be about is not necessarily explaining all of the mechanics of what they do, but more so A, kind of how we chose to deal with the mechanics, and then B, I'll go over like what we particularly struggled with as a team and kind of like how we got through it, right? So the first thing for this fight is comp. There's not a lot of variance when it comes to like number of healers. Everyone's running 4 healers. The DPS check is still pretty tight. 5 healers would just be kind of pointless, and I think you'd fail the DPS check with 5 healers. The big thing that you want is you want at least like 4, probably 5 movement speed abilities. So we had 4 druids, 1 shaman for this, and then you kind of want to prioritize ranged players for this fight. It makes P1 significantly easier the more ranged players you have. The same with P3. And then the more boomkins, the better. So start of the fight, nothing really unstandard. You lost on pole, you watch this release on the ground. The boss doesn't really move, so you can't really talk about positioning. She's just kind of there. So this again is pretty standard for most squads, is using this weak aura. And basically what it'll do is it'll assign players to left and right set of arrows. So what we said was, okay, no matter where the arrows are in the room, you're always basing left and right as if you're in the middle of the room looking at the arrow set. And what the weak aura will do is it'll prioritize players with high stacks, and then it'll also kind of calculate in things like, does that player have a carrying pod available to clear their stacks, something like that. So it's a pretty nice weak aura to have, and it just kind of takes away a lot of thinking. So you definitely want to use it. So for like the first arrows, we just had it like go a little bit past star. And the first kind of like substandard thing we did was like the first veil, like we just didn't really care where it went. So generally speaking, it'd go on the melee because we were like a little bit melee heavy. The way the mechanic works is it will choose the largest cluster of players, and that's where the veil will be. So you can see like a player got hit by the veil, but we were like 200 pulls in, so like we could obviously deal with it at this point. So this next veil is pretty important to bait. So this is where the veil baits become increasingly important, because you want the boss to be in a certain spot to deal with the arrows and then set up like the next set of arrows, right? So what the call was here was, okay, so look to see if you're assigned to left or right. After the players get chained, everyone, or like most players, need to go bait. So you'll kind of see how it plays out. So I call it clear the bait. So players are going to their sides. They get locked in, then everyone should be kind of grouping up like in between both arrow sets here. And this is where like the first, I'd say, kind of like mechanical challenge of the fight is. So what players would really struggle with is, let's say, okay, bait's in the middle, but like I'm getting dragged to like the arrow set over here, right? It can be kind of hard to kind of maneuver that. So the instinct is to run away from your arrow. Obviously, if you get dragged into it, you like the raid. But what you should be doing in this situation is, okay, like if I'm chained to this arrow over here, you can use like the pull of the arrow to like, get out of the veil even faster. So you can kind of use it to pull you towards, and you can run away at the last second. And this is where you first want to start assigning CDs. So we had like specific DPS CDs to deal with each arrow set. It's cool. So you deal with the arrows, and then you just group back up on the boss. And like the rule of thumb for the players with the ranged Heartseeker was kind of just go the opposite of the boss, right? And this again, I think, is like the next mechanical check of the fight. So what players would really struggle with is, okay, particularly like the second or third player like in like the causal chain. So you saw Yellow Pally go first, and then Draven's going second. What we would say is just place your first arrow either like where the ads are, or ideally behind where they are. What players would struggle with is, let's say I'm the second player dropping off an arrow, and there's an ad from the first set targeting the player that's dropping off the second set. So like, what do you do, right? The answer is you just stun the ad that's chasing you. You can kind of use whatever to stay alive there. This took, I think, our squad like a little bit too many pulls to figure out how to do. So every player just kind of needs to have a plan of what am I going to do when I have an arrow on me and there's an ad chasing me, right? So just already have that in your mind of, okay, like I'm going to use my stun, or I'm going to use like my knockback, or like whatever it may be. So after the ads are out, you want everyone to stack up. And once again, this is pretty standard. So you have like a Ring of Frost, and then you have like a Ring of Peace, right? So ads get frozen. If for some reason they run through, you can Ring of Frost them back, or Ring of Peace them back. And it's just rinse and repeat. Baiting. So I kind of call this bait late, but the next set that we're baiting is pretty particular. You want it to be like over here, and you see it later in the rig exactly where purple is. So you bait and you gate out. My kind of tinfoil hat theory is that after she does a veil and she's like placing down arrows, she kind of jumps around the room, and like what for our squad you wanted to avoid was the boss to then jump on top of an existing arrow set, because the boss faces at 84, and it's kind of those fights where pushing too early is really bad. So it was my idea, my theory, that when she jumps, it's like relative, like how many players are close to her. But honestly, it's just completely random.
What?
So she's jumping around. Here we got kind of lucky with where she is. And then once again, this boss isn't really going to move until the next veil, right? So she's not on top of that arrow set, so you're not going to have like too much accidental cleave. So here's gonna be like a really scary point in the fight. You want to nuke these arrow sets as fast as possible, and she's gonna shoot 3 more players to kind of take the arrows. And then like this is pretty difficult to stay alive during.
Should you be stopping boss guys?
I think that for most squads, this is like the most amount of deaths that they're gonna have, is kind of learning how to deal with all of this damage. Because you get the 3 arrows, so lots of ads coming in, and then she's gonna have like the swirls on the ground at the same time.
Look at your feet. Still no boss.
So you can see the boss is pretty low. What you want to do is you want to bait Veil 4, and then push the boss like as she's kind of up in the air. Really, the only reason you do this is you're basically buying time for CDs to come back up, particularly on your boomkins. So we're going to enter this phase with some extra stacks. It's not a big deal, kind of like at the point where we are in the fight. But when you're first pogging this, like the HPS check here is a little bit crazy.
Okay.
So we all group up, and what we do is you do Darkness Link, and then you want to pop a couple of immunities. It's really beneficial, like within Link, to pop an immunity, because the initial damage from all of the arrows on a player is a lot. So if you can immune within Link and Darkness, it's basically just effective rate healing. So how we kind of microed the DPS was we had 2 boomkins, and they just kind of go ham. Particularly, like they need to focus like the farther away set, and then melee players will get to the close sets and then work their way towards the middle, to where range will be like outer, then towards middle. And we didn't really assign too many DPS CDs outside of boomkins for this phase, and they're just ramp. So we kill it pretty fast here, and like while you're progging, this will be like an insanely scary part of the fight, but then you'll just get in a rhythm, and this becomes like pretty simple. We really didn't have too many arrive deaths, so there's like no need to kind of continue to call it out. It's just you just dodged it here. It's honestly like a pretty boring part of the fight. So here you're going to use your next movement speed ability, and then you want to make a decision on what DPS CDs are you going to use on each side, and then how many players are you going to go on each side. Even on our kill night, we were changing the amount of players that are going to either side.
Yeah, Janet, let's be good about damage throbs.
So here we decided to send one less DPS player left and one more DPS player right compared to our last poll. Because there's kind of two checks that you need to make. You want to kill these relatively fast, but you want to kill them at the same time so the bridges go down at the same time. And like the big deal here is just dodging. Like getting hit by one of these or two makes it really difficult to stay alive. I get hit. I get 3 stacks here, but I feel like I have the kind of anxiety of getting there first. And then the next kind of element that you need to decide for your squad is how are you going to handle the veils, right? So there's some variants here of like on our team on left, like as many players that could stack up as possible, then move together was like the play, to where on the other side of the platform, they were like a little bit more freeform. So here it looks like we sent 2, 4, 6, 7 or 8 players. So we did an 8-12 split. Like I said, the pull before we did a 9-11 split. It's just going to kind of depend on your comp, like what CDs do you want to use, you know, how much damage are your players doing. And from like a tanking perspective, this Goliath kind of fucks. As you can see, like I have to use my dampen, my Celestial Brew was on cooldown, I use my blood scale trinket, and like I touch a death to clear my stagger. So left side was pretty.
Like a DPS loss, weapon pick number.
Yeah, so you hear me call it like I think it's a DPS loss, because left side like we were pretty far behind like where we normally were. So like, right side finished obviously ahead because they had an extra DPS that time.
Hot.
So this will be the first boss burn.
Gets down.
Nothing super special here. You just want to have a Warlock Gate down. You want to focus it or use like the new item in the game that lets you just use a gate.
Gates.
And for both burns, you want to use as many like aggressive CDs as possible. You can basically get away with without failing a DPS check on that.
Get dodge wave.
So what I did there is I like to pre-place a Transcend, because like one of the harder parts of tanking this boss, especially if you're the one kind of tanking the second set of Ranger Heartseekers, is getting to where you need to run. So if I pre-place my Transcend, I can Transcend back, then kind of be at the front of the pack, because I need to get to the ads first to get threat. So coming up, I think that the Janus side to this fight, I think this is the hardest part of P2. I think we did, was it 12 or was it 13-7?
Cringe go forward on right side.
I think it was 13-7 split. Just a lot of players on the side. And what's going to be going on is there's going to be Crushing Dreads going out, as well as orbs being spawned, and then you also have to deal with Veil. So you have to like DPS the orbs down, which do damage, you know, when you kill them or when they detonate. Crushing Dread are going out on players, which need to be dispelled or will deal a fuck ton of damage. And then the Curse of Lethargy. So we get Veils here. On right side this time, like we have to bait as a team and then move. And as you can see, like everyone's health is just kind of low. And I think like one of our biggest mistakes here is really not ironing out like how important the decurses are, and like stressing it on players that aren't used to decursing, right? Like a DPS shaman or mages that need to be decursing. So you see multiple players just at 3 stacks.
Okay, dodge wave.
And from a tanking perspective here, there's like no reason for me not to clear my stagger. So that's like a pretty big mistake on my end. The game like I had to start playing was, okay, like I need to use a defensive here to do Ranger Heartseeker, but I need to be saving my defensives for P3 because I'm going to be doing the long run, which I have to have my Dampen Harm, and I need to have my Fort Brew, and I need to save my Trinket in case I'm selected by the Veil while I'm running. So I can't really overuse CDs in this phase. It's pretty much just Celestial Brew for second platform onward.
Wave. face down. Go.
So once again, this phase is pretty standard. The DPS check here, like what you should be aiming for, is just ideally 77 point anything is a kill, and 76 point anything you're like ahead, right? And it's really good for morale if you can get the boss below 77%. So here I think we get like 76.6 or something. Yeah.
Nice.
So we had like a really, really good boss burn here.
Alright, focus up, boys. We got the shit. Sit up.
You can get an extra global on Sylvanas, but there's nothing as a monk that I could actually use in that free global point. It's not enough time to use Crackling Jade Lightning. Okay, so for P3, I think that this is where the more that you can plan for in pre-prep, the better off you're going to be, right? Because it's 8.5 minutes into the fight, and the fight will be a 14-minute fight. So the first big mistake I think that we made was kind of how we assigned players where to stand. What I originally did was I just took a picture of like the room here, and then I just kind of like wrote players' names in, not like randomly, but kind of randomly, to where like there was 20 names here on the platform. What we ended up doing for our kill poll is if you just plan your player names around something in the platform, then they will have a better time understanding where exactly to stand, right? So you can see there's kind of a grid, right? There's like an outer line. Okay, you can plan players' names around there. There's an inner line. You can plan players' names around there. And the covenant symbol, you can plan players' names around there. And that way it allows them to understand it a lot easier. The other element that I think took me personally a little bit too long to understand was how to do this run without dying. So what I was trying to do originally was the first check that you have to make is I have to leave this platform and clear it before this soak goes off. Otherwise I die. All right. So first time I entered P3, I died to this shit. So what we started doing was I start the fight off with Aurora, and then I Tiger's List kind of halfway through. And then I have to use my Dampen Harm before I leave this platform. I can't use it in the air, and you kind of want it to be ticking on you as you're flying through the air. And I land on this platform. I'll use my Fort Brew, and then I'm saving my Trinket because what can happen is this Veil cast that's about to happen. It can solo land on me, which I'll need an extra defensive to live. I should have picked that puddle up. I didn't. It's not the biggest deal in the world, though.
Spell no sense. Dispel that.
So cool. I pre-place my Transcend. I just Transcend out after I get dispelled.
Good.
The other thing is we didn't try to min-max the Riz too much. Honestly, I don't think it's that big of a deal. You just want everyone to leave at the same time.
3.
So I just do a call out. And then from a tanking standpoint particularly, I think the second platform is where it took me and the other tank the longest to figure out a system that worked. We kind of kept swapping back and forth like who was going to go clear the third platform. What we ended up doing is I tanked the boss for majority of this platform, then he went off and cleared. So the game that I'm trying to play here as a tank is to use the least amount of CDs as possible to stay alive. The other thing about this platform, I'm going to rewind just a little bit, is this set of arrows is really difficult for players, and it's really hard for them to understand. So what you want to do for this set in particular is, sure, the first 2 arrows, they just go to the third platform. The third arrow has to go to the fourth platform. Not only is it a damage reduction on their raid, but there's a soak that happens on third platform, and if they're on third platform, they will die to this soak. So what the third player has to do is they have to leave the same time as the second player, but then jump to the far platform over here in the corner. And I have a clip, or I have it saved in a VOD, of our hunter that is doing the third arrow, and he does it fucking perfectly. And once again, I think this took our squad just a little bit too long to understand how to do. So, okay, cool. He sees the shot go out, it lands, he instantly leaves. And what you want to do is you don't want to leave the same time as the second player. Don't base your timer off of that. Base your timer off of when you see the first shot land. Cool. So he's like waiting on the the last platform. He sees the soaks go off. He can go. He's a hunter, so he has high movement speed. Awesome. He's back on the platform. Once again, I think that took our squad a little bit too long to figure out how to do.
Javen's doing the hard arrow. Death Knives. Move. Plants. Screen position soon.
So we had screen positions, and we had veil positions.
Veil and fun. And then soaks after veil.
And this is the first platform that you get soaks.
Soaks.
So when you're planning out your players on the room, these two soaks will almost always be in these two positions. Sometimes they spawn randomly, but generally speaking, they're going to spawn here in this corner. So what we had, I think we had like a boomkin and a warlock, or a double boomkin. Like their positioning in the room was already where these soaks are going to be. On the other note, you can see like I fucking spin my camera because I'm angry. I procced my cheat death there. I was playing from the area of saving CDs too much here in this phase. So basically my job is I have to clear the room and tank the boss at the same time. So I'm like trying to really be conservative when it comes to popping my defensives without dying. And I just made a bad call there. I should have Celestial Brood.
Okay, to watch your feet. You can start spreading.
So here the other tank has the boss, so I'm just kind of making space. The Death Knights that are about to come up.
Spell no sense.
So clean them up, get them in the corner,
Plants.
get it a spell,
Soaks.
then I take boss back.
Snit in the envy.
And these arrows, they're standard.
Can last.
Soaks. And prep for veil.
So you get the soaks, so players get knocked, and then you instantly want players to start spreading out for Veil. So I will start clearing up stacks here to make room for Veil.
And set me double.
As you can see, I get to 8 stacks, which isn't too high, and then the other tank's at 14 stacks. So like this is just kind of like a scary time for both tanks, because he has to go clear up the other platform, and then I'm clearing up the current platform.
Stack for healing.
Spell no sense.
So we got our spells. This is our first kind of death in P3. I think he just got clipped by Veil.
Good. Leaving in 3, 2, 1. Death Knights, you can start moving. Move. Plants.
So with Death Knights, what I'd always say is move, have the Death Knights kind of move out a little bit, make sure they're not hitting each other, and then you want the Death Knights to plant to give the raid the more time to like react to the Death Knights.
Boss.
We have movement soaks into veil after this screen.
Okay, so you just heard a call. You're gonna have movement soaks into Veil after the scream. I think these next two soaks are the hardest part of the fight. So the first set of soaks that happen on third platform, what will happen is the soaks happen, and then instantly after the soaks, there's a Veil. So what will happen for a lot of squads if you watch them prog, like what happened with us when we prog, is cool, we get the soaks, but every player that's doing the soak is getting knocked to the middle of the room, and then the likelihood of one of them being chosen by Veil, like either them getting knocked or the players in the middle of the room, is very high. So you just get a bunch of extra stacks. So what we said was players with movement displacement have priority for doing these soaks. So like a Windwalker monk with Transcends, like a warlock with their portal, like a hunter can, hit it, disengage. Someone with a goblin jump can get hits off the platform, then disengage back. We basically need players that are doing soaks that aren't going to get knocked to the middle of the room.
Here comes soaks. Into veil.
So I do the job of clearing up the other platform here. So you can see me leave. And what I would save is I would save my Dampen Harm and my Trinket for this overlap here. So I pop Dampen Harm instantly. I'm cleaning up stacks. I think I use Healthstone as well. Yeah, I Healthstone, get hits. And what I should have done and what I normally did is I want to get dispelled as fast as possible. What I should have done is I should have ran right by the boss and popped my Trinket. But what I did is I just ran past the boss. I saw a player there. I pop my blood scale and then get dispelled. It's a little inefficient when I come to blood scale usage. And I should have also helped clean up stacks right here. But I grab boss. I get super fucking low. I should have called for bark. I think he just barks me out of reaction. Yeah, I should have called for it though.
Spell no sense.
We will have the immunity soaks right after the...
So this next set of soaks is what's called the kind of quote unquote immunity soaks. But realistically, I think calling them that is kind of a bait. any player can go and grab these soaks that are coming up. Because she's not going to do another Banshee's Fury while we're on this platform. So stacks kind of are irrelevant because every squad masses spells as they leave. So you get the soaks. We got lucky. There's one in melee.
Let's start spreading for Veil.
So here's another pretty scary part. You can see like I'm kind of at high stacks. I think I had my back turned to the boss. So I took some extra damage there. Pretty big mistake.
Veil in 5.
I need you to take boss if you can, like 10 soaks.
Yeah. So
Veil
our
is
taunt
on
stops weren't super smooth here. We're spreading for Veil, but me and the other tank should have made more space for the raid here.
Good stack
Luckily,
loading,
like those players had
stack
good
loading,
reaction
no
speeds.
Spell no sense.
So you hear 3 calls for dispels. The other element to third platform that I didn't cover was you want a player with an immunity to go finish off clearing fourth platform. Sometimes the tanks do this, but 90% of the time, like what we had was a Demon Hunter. We had a Demon Hunter go to the last platform, grab the stacks, pop his immunity, come back and get dispelled. Because you can see like the tanks have to clear up this platform and tank the boss. It's just a lot when you could do it with immunity. So I think going forward, what we had was I told players to kind of stack up where we leave. It's not like the clear spot in the world, and you have 3 different players calling for dispels. You have me, the tank, and the Demon Hunter that just wouldn't go cleared. We all should have just stacked where we left and just gotten mass at the same time.
2,
But
1.
it works out. We do a mass just for
Nith,
safety.
you're doing first arrow here.
And then
The Nith and the Envy.
what our plan was, and what actually ended up happening is different. So our plan was where we start the phase is just home base for both sets of arrows.
Melee, don't kill yourselves. Token last.
But you'll kind of see how that plays out.
Good.
So you want to set up a Warlock Gate, and then players go one at a time, really standard.
Death Knights, followed by Banshees.
And then you basically want to start spreading out here. So you spread out for the Death Knives, so Death Knives kind of get away from the raids, and then tanks are going to have to like go off into a corner and get dispelled during
Move
this, so
and
a little bit of
plants.
an overlap. But you just really want players not to get hit by Death Knives. It's pretty much guaranteed death.
Good. There'll be screen positions here soon. And pools right after. So if you hit the clear, that'll be followed by Veil.
So I made
Try
a
and find a safe spot here.
pretty bad call here. What we need to do tanking wise for this fight is you want to start positioning the boss for where you want to stand next. What we ended up doing is I start like running around the room clearing.
Veil.
Veil.
So I start clearing for Veil, right?
Let's get
So
to
she
home
lands
base.
over there,
Take boss Nith,
and then the boss is just kind of like
Spell
in a
no
bad
sense,
spot.
please.
Like the opposite of where we are, and being able to move this boss is really fucking difficult. So as you can see, is like she's just like not moving.
Where can we drop spirits?
Hunters are asking like where can we drop spirits.
Just go to our bosses.
So I just make the call of like go where the boss is now, right? Like there's no point.
Yeah, we're
Like-
in the opposite corner of boss right now. Look at the opposite.
So we're not gonna have Warlock Gate,
Bosses,
but it's
guys, go
fine.
first.
Like, it's not the biggest deal in the
There's Death
world.
Knights forward. Me and the monkey.
And this is probably the hardest part of last platform. Is that you're gonna get the arrows and the Death Knives at the same time. So what you want is the arrows obviously to leave, and then the Death Knives, like we just had them scoot forward and plant, and it was kind of on the rest of the raid to dodge where the lines currently were.
Draven last.
And I see multiple different approaches to this. I don't think there's like a wrong answer.
Just move them plants.
So-
Plants.
They plant. Awesome. We have Link. I think it hit like 4 players here, but as long as like we had Link barrier down,
Make sure you pot it.
it's fine.
Good. The spell on no sense.
And then what's gonna happen is you're gonna get like one last round of dispels and then kill the fight. But we killed it a little bit fast.
Spell on death.
So we killed the fight. Yeah. So like I said, I think like overall like our squad played pretty well in this fight. I think like during Prague, it took me personally as a tank a little bit too long to figure out last phase, and then as a raid leader, I feel like where I dropped the ball the most was being able to coach players properly in P1, and then P3, being able to coach players on how to do the first set of arrows properly. But thank you guys for watching. Yeah, I will have my Twitch in the description, and then I'll also have a couple other people from my guild, their Twitch in the description if you guys want to check that out. All right, thank you.